I think that I had very heavily focused more on, working in Africa. But then COVID came and it was like, there's a big world out there. So how can I equip myself with the mental fortitude and strength to actually be able to keep going? How can I help more people figure out like what they want to do for work, figure out like how to change their minds or not change their minds, figure out like how to learn what they need to learn, and like be able to thrive in their work. I think one of the things that like I benefited from was obviously working in tech early, but also my curiosity led me there because when somebody is bringing something new and it's like, oh, would you like to work on this? I'm typically not thinking about ways it could fail, but instead thinking about ways it could be successful, right? Which has really helped me work on some very early stuff.
Hi, and welcome to yet another episode of A Couple of Things. Today, I have a guest, and we talk about so many things. We talk about surviving and thriving in uncertain situations, staying resilient through changes, the universality of challenges, owning your narrative, AI, expanding your career possibilities, developing curiosity, finding great opportunities, making impact, and knowing when to move on from your job. I really enjoyed having this conversation with my friend, and I hope you enjoy listening to it too. Hi, welcome to today's episode of A Couple of Things. Today, I have a very, very special guest. I've mentioned him a couple of times on the podcast, and finally, we're having a conversation for the podcast. So today, I have Olabinjo. Olabinjo, please
Hi,
introduce
my name
yourself.
is Olabinjo and I am Olabinjo. Is that enough?
Oh my goodness, that's obviously not enough.
About
Tell us about
myself,
yourself, please.
okay, I just came back from a run
Yes.
and like the run sucked. So I used to run really well, but now my pace is really bad. So that's one thing about myself. I like to exercise. What else do I like to do? Spend time in nature. For work, I do marketing. For companies. A lot of literally my entire actual career has been in marketing. What other thing can I say about myself? I don't know. Okay, I love Jesus. Is that a good fact?
All right, that's
Yeah.
fine, I guess. I guess we'll uncover the rest as we go. I feel like it's going to
Ah,
be a very long episode, but let's see. Uh, but it'll be very
okay.
good. It'll be very good. Okay, what's on your mind today? That's how I
Today,
always start.
what's
Let's
on
start
my
there.
mind today? I don't know, different things, I guess. I'm waiting for
Mm,
Google I/O to start so I can watch the stream. I've been hoping to actually catch
nice.
it physically for the last couple of years, but my friends at Google don't invite me. So I'll be begging. I have a US visa, please invite me. So I'm looking forward to that. There's also supposed to be some OpenAI announcement today. I also want to watch that and see what it is. So that's like literally what I've been up to today, just planning my planning my work week, planning my calendar, blocking time off. I'm also trying to figure out like how I can do more exercise because like now I'm back to work, so I can't exercise in the mornings. I have to exercise in the evenings, but like I need to know how many times a week I can actually realistically go because I made some very silly
Mm,
mistakes last week. So I've literally been thinking about how to probably organize my time. What other things on my mind? I'm writing a growth case study, which you've read. I want to edit today. After this call, I'm probably just going to start editing it. I want to edit today because I need to actually get out of the way. It's been in my head for like, I don't know, since October last year. This is May. That's a very long time for somebody to work on something. So
mm.
I want to offload, basically just finish editing, work on the images and get
Remove
it
it from
out.
your
Like it
brain.
needs to go. It's been in my brain for too long. It needs to go. What else am I thinking about? Okay, I read a very interesting article on was it Friday or Saturday about stable coins, and then found another interesting article about stable coins on Sunday.
Is it Tedros
Yes, Teddy's
article I read
article,
it?
and then there's another guy who used to work at Cash App who also wrote another article. So I've literally been thinking about some of the points that they raised in the article because this is something I have personally been thinking about for a very, very, very long time, even though I haven't particularly researched anything on the subject. And obviously because I still work in the crypto blockchain space, I'm trying to see how like some of the things they raise can impact my work and how I can like
Mm,
provide some value to the org from knowing these things and from experiencing them and seeing them like provide utility for me. So those are the kind of things.
mm.
What else have I thought about today? Okay, I saw a new bird today on my run. So for people who don't know, I watch birds and I tag them in an app called Merlin. There's also eBird, but Merlin and eBird, I use
Okay.
both apps to track them when I see them, just because I don't know their names, right? I don't see what their names are, how long are they going to be in this area for, and some history sometimes. There's a new bird today called a little grebe that I saw for the very first time ever. I've never seen it before. And I was just thinking about how like the birds have changed since I started bird watching, I think in July or August last year, when I actually started like tracking the birds. How like every week I go out, like when I go for a walk or something, I see a different bird. And just how like, the weather, the seasons, the climate affect how they move around, the winds. And so it's always nice. There's always something to like look forward to, I guess, with like nature, because it's never really the same, even if it can look like it for a very long time. What else have I been thinking
Hmm.
about? There's one more thing. There's one more
There's
thing. There's
still
one more thing.
more. I was like, you're thinking about a
I don't
lot
know what
of
my
things
brain is for. I don't
today.
know. There's one more thing. There's one more thing.
Like,
I'm reading the
okay.
three body problem, and it's
Okay. Oh, there's a
yes, I
Netflix show
haven't watched
about
the
it,
Netflix
yeah?
show yet. I want to read the book first. So I'm reading Three Body Problem, and it's really interesting. I think like about how much people know about the world. And this is linked to the bird thing. How much we know as human beings about the world and even the universe that is outside of our world of Earth now, all the things we know about Earth. But we actually still like we don't know enough. And like from reading that book, they'll say, oh, somebody discovered something in the 1980s, or then somebody else came in um some other time, like in the 90s or something. The book is set in different times, right? And the person found out this thing. And it's so interesting, like even me as a person that has lived on this earth for a couple of years, I still like discover new things every day about the earth. Like the bird I saw today, right? Like I've never seen it before. And I'm like, this is so nice. I guess like if you, depending on the perspective you have, you can actually find, I guess, joy and curiosity and expand your curiosity because there's so many things happening
There's
on
so
this
much,
earth,
yeah.
man.
Right. I think I've talked about this before where it's like there's so much going on in the world. There's so much in like subcultures and even like culturally, not just like biologically or
Yeah,
physiologically, even socially and culturally. There's so much happening in so many places in the world that I will never see. And it's
yeah,
insanely wild to me that there's this much, for lack of a better word, diversity in experiences and even beyond the quote unquote concrete physical things that you can
yes,
touch and see.
yes.
There's
There's
just
so much
so much
going on.
happening.
And even like related to that, there was also the Aurora Borealis this weekend.
Oh my God.
I missed the Friday one, and then it meant I didn't see
Do you
Saturday
know
and Sunday, which is sad.
I didn't even know it was happening. So it's very annoying because when I moved to the Netherlands, everyone was talking about, oh, the
Yeah,
auroras and all those things are so pretty. You can see it in the Netherlands. And every year I've been seeing about it, but it's never in my city. And the other cities are too far. Like by the time they say it's happening, it's too far for me to say I'm going. But this time it was actually in Amsterdam. And I
yes,
didn't know. I was so mad. I was actually so upset. Like I didn't see any news about it until the day after. And I was like, what?
it's so annoying.
Why? But I hope next
I
time I'm
missed it
able
on
to actually
Friday.
catch it. It's so annoying. Like, why am I here if I'm not seeing
Also, I'm
such
like
things
a person who
in real
like I'm
life?
always checking the weather and stuff. So I don't know how I didn't hear about this thing until Saturday morning when in a group chat I'm in, somebody was like, "Oh, did anyone see the Northern Lights?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Did anyone see the Northern Lights?" So I go and Google it and I'm like, everybody's seen the Northern Lights except me. Wow, and I was like, "Wow."
Honestly, and they always are like, "Oh, the best nights in the Netherlands is like
Oh.
in peak winter." I'm like,
Yeah,
May, so I wasn't even
apparently there's a
expecting
storm.
it. But
There's a
anyway,
not like your regular weather type of storm. There's a geomagnetic storm, or is that what it's called? Which is also a very interesting thing because I know that they were like I never thought that they were like magnetic storms. I know that the Earth has north and south poles, right, which are magnetic. But I know that like at certain points in time, the sun also gives off certain type of magnetic properties and the moon as well, and there can be a storm. I was like, wow, that's so like incredible,
no, honestly, so much we don't
incredible.
know in this life is, and I think that there are two things that I can do for you. One can be like, "Wow, there's so much to learn," and then the other one is like, "Okay, there's too much to learn. I'm not even
That's
doing it again.
also
Please, it's
that's
okay."
also like valid because it's like yeah, there's too much. Where does it stop? When do you stop and when do you is it what's the word? When do you continue?
When can you
Yeah,
actually just live your
but I think that
life?
it's also like if you like learning, if you have like cultivate the habit of just like learning, there's always something that's going to be interesting about life,
Mm,
regardless of like whatever it is that you're going through, because like, you could be seeing shege or not.
yeah,
But like there's still something interesting that can like excite you, something that's good, maybe, or that's just like
yeah.
incredible. But I think for me it's also like very humbling, right? Because like I'm just this
Mm,
one small
mm-hmm,
person in this like gigantic
mm.
universe, of which of all the animals on it, I'm not even the biggest. So of all the human beings, I'm not the tallest. So
Neither the biggest nor the
so
smallest, neither the tallest nor the
so it's like
shortest.
sometimes just
Just there.
very humbling that all these things are happening. And like
Yeah.
we are not doing I don't know how to explain it. We don't particularly have much effect over things like this. Obviously, for some climate stuff we
Mm,
do, but for certain other things,
yeah.
it's like we don't. Like if a what's it called, an asteroid is coming now, maybe we can stop it, but also maybe we can't.
Maybe we can't. Maybe it's just going to hit all of us, and
Maybe we
we're going
also
to die.
can't. Which is so like I wonder how like people who like I know many people have like plans, right? And they have like annual plans and whatever, like deal with the
Yeah.
uncertainty. Because me is like every day is a new day. But some people are like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years,
Right.
30 years, and they're still able to push through that period of time. But me, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen next week. Let me just catch my phone.
I don't even know what's going to
Let me
happen
catch
this
my phone.
evening.
Now.
Because like you think about also, and I think about this a lot with like us,
Yeah,
like human beings, and then particularly me and people that I know who are like very driven and want to do this and that and that and that, and
yeah.
making all these life plans. And then where does an event like COVID fit into your life plan?
So events like COVID, okay. So for me, I don't think I particularly had any plans pre-COVID. But I know that I was doing some work. I was at Bondo and we're doing some work. And I think that the events of COVID particularly changed the products we're trying to build and like the trajectory of the company. So that's one thing that happened.
Hmm.
What other thing happened? I didn't particularly plan to travel. I don't think I found anything, but I know that had a significant impact. And even like while I was at Future Africa as well, I think that event had a significant impact in changing trajectory of like the firm and the business going forward. So that's how COVID changed a lot of things. What else would I say that it changed for me? I think it opened my eyes more at the time, and maybe even still now, to like global opportunities. I think that I had very heavily focused more on, working in Africa. But then COVID came and it was like,
Mm.
there's a big world out there. there's, there's a
There's
very
more.
there's a very big expansive world out there. So I think that's another thing. What else did COVID? I don't know. Maybe I think I wash my hands more often now than before. I'm very I mean I used to wash my hands before, but I think now I'm so conscious of how much like dirt and germs are just everywhere. Like when I get on the train and I get off,
Mm,
my hands just start to itch me because I haven't like used a sanitizer. Do you get what I mean? Which didn't used to
yeah,
happen to me before.
yeah.
Um,
Probably also a bit
yeah,
like psychological and mental
yeah.
than actually
Like if someone
physical.
is sneezing around me, I become so conscious about it. Yeah, like the
Hmm.
other time I was on the train, one guy was sneezing. I mean, I came out, I went to the next coach because I was like, it was really wheezing. And I was like, yeah, you should have said that to my brother. But like, yeah, I think that's something that has changed. What else? Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. But I feel like where I was even going with that was more like we have all
Yeah,
these grand plans and things. And like you were saying about how with it just opened you up to the opportunities outside of what you
yeah,
had seen before or what you had been focusing on before. Because it's not like those opportunities didn't
exactly.
exist before. You just didn't like think about them or focus on them. But then COVID happened and it opened you up in like a different way than you had
Yep.
approached your work before. And it's just what we were saying previously about
Yeah.
there's just so much that you can't then be fixated on a specific way of being or
Yes.
doing something and then losing out
Yeah,
on
and I
so many
think
other
like
things.
something I felt at some point during COVID was like obviously because I'm Nigerian and COVID had its own effects. Nigeria very differently from some other countries in the world. I think at some point I was thinking like, oh, why so many global changing events in my generation? And then I started reading about like the history of other epidemic. And like, yeah, it was worse for other people. It probably was for my parents and my grandparents, right? And I think like
Mm,
the perspective I started to have then was like, okay, so if things change, then what do I need to do? Because like, still need to survive ourselves. So how
yeah,
can
so
I
just keep
like
moving.
equip myself with the mental what's the word now? Fortitude and strength to actually be able to keep going. Because there's some people who are able to thrive in very uncertain conditions. I don't know if I'm like that yet,
Mm,
but I think that for me it was like, okay, this is interesting, and like the world is upside down, but like, how do I become a person that knows that okay, you know what, the world is going to change. I don't know what it's going to be like or how it's going to be, but like, how
yeah,
can I become a person that can? And I'm not even trying to like exploit opportunities. How can I just be able to push through those things, right? Just like,
survive
yeah,
and
just like to not
thrive.
be stressed or too weighed down by the events. Because even like as terrible as COVID was, and like COVID was a really, really terrible year for so many. I know so many people who lost their jobs like the whole of 2020 and like lost family members and stuff. Like it was still like temporary, right? Like it was such a
Mm,
temporary thing that today I don't think like when I go out, I don't see anybody wearing face mask. I was complaining the other day that, like yesterday I went to
yeah.
buy food and like the staff at the restaurant were not wearing face mask anymore and they were talking about my food. And I was like,
Mm,
just 2 years ago, you would have assumed that when this thing happened, the entire world,
mm,
everybody was going to be masked up 100% all the time. But like here we are, just four
yeah.
years later, back to status quo.
Everybody's
And
just
it's so
chilling.
like interesting, I guess, how like even some of the toughest things that happen like to us are also like like personally now, not even like on a global scale,
Temporary.
obviously, they can also be temporary depending on depending on the
Yeah.
thing. But like a bunch of them are temporary, but we tend to
Mm.
be um
In the moment, it feels like
yes,
this is the
yes.
end.
In the moment, it feels so overwhelming and it can be so much to bear. Um, yeah,
Yeah. But how can we actually do that? Like remind ourselves or be in that space where it's like moving with the consciousness, like, okay, this is hard right now and this is terrible. But eventually at some point it's going
mm.
to end.
I think that reading history helps. Um, I think that like reading history. So like in the example I gave, right? Like I did not realize like how much stuff, how much like how many epidemics had happened, how many diseases had been widespread around the world. The only one I could remember in my own close
Mm.
memory was maybe like HIV and AIDS. But turns out that it wasn't even
Oh
that
yeah.
HIV and AIDS did not even kill as many people as certain other things that have happened, right? Or
Hmm.
did not destroy like economies and countries, right? So it was very
Yeah.
interesting for me to just like read. It was literally somebody who wrote a whole article about it. It was really long, and I really took my time to read it. There was also somebody who wrote about it happening in West Africa specifically, right? So it was just like I think reading history can help. It can help us see that we don't particularly live. I mean, we probably live better lives than people like 100 years ago in certain ways, but we don't particularly live
Yeah.
different lives, right?
The challenges and
And
the
different like
issues.
challenges.
That's interesting though. And it's true because I think that when you see other things, it tends to rearrange your view of or your perception of what is
Yeah,
currently happening. And it grounds you in a way that like, okay, get yourself together
yeah.
because this is not
I
going
mean,
to
it's
last
always like there's the
forever.
benefit of like mourning and crying or being upset, but I think there's also benefit in like
Yeah,
grieving and going through
grieving,
those
yeah, and all
those
of
those
those
moments. But
things.
there's also the benefit of like seeing what's happening um to other
Okay,
people.
it's time to move.
Do you
Like
get what I'm
you
saying?
can't
Yeah, I think
camp here
also
forever.
biographies can also be really nice. And I think one thing I like about biographies is like biographies are like automatically some level of like self-selection. I don't know what the word to do is like a success
Mm,
bias, right? Which is like,
mm,
well, there were 10,000 people in this country at this time. But look at what this person did in the same moment, which is like interesting.
yeah. I never thought about that
Yeah,
way, but that makes
which is like
sense.
super interesting to read some people's stories and what they went through and some of the shit that they also saw. Um, like I think Abraham Lincoln's biography is super. You know,
I was just gonna ask you that. What
I've
biography
never read
did you
Abraham
really like
Lincoln
reading?
biography, but I think I watched the movie when it came out. But what biography have I
Mm,
read? That's an interesting question. Though. I have to think. I've read Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. Um, I think I read that when I was
mm.
like, I think before I went to uni or my first year in uni. It was very interesting. It's very different from like how biographies typically are because the book says a lot of bad things about the subject.
The
So
subjects. Yeah, because I was gonna say that like, do you think the biographies are usually like what's that word, like
oh yes,
praising, and there's a word that
yes,
I'm trying to remember, but it's more or like, oh, this person is
yes.
an
They
angel and they've only
tend
done great and beautiful
yeah,
and perfect
yeah, they
things.
tend to do that. And I think it's because of who the subjects are. They're often people that are quote unquote very successful. So like if I want to read about somebody that I think is successful, I don't want to read the bad things. I like honestly, because it's a lot to
Fair.
grapple with when you like read some of the things. Like if you read the Steve Jobs biography now by like Walter Isaacson, and you're a very big Steve Jobs fan, like the people that are huge Apple and Steve Jobs fans, it makes them grapple with the fact that maybe this guy wasn't that good. He's just a
Yeah, he was just a
person
human
and
being.
he did good business. Do you get? And I think that's why like people those books
Yeah.
don't some of those books don't really popular are not really very popular because of the person I'm talking about. But like if you read what's another one? If you read like Da Vinci, also Walter Isaacson, it's very interesting. It's less, here are the negative sides, but more like here's a guy who was more intelligent than most of the people that were his age in his city, and here's how that like impacted him. Another biography I think I have read is an autobiography actually, by what's this guy? It's Awolowo's autobiography written by himself, which is really interesting. Um,
I find
yeah,
autobiographies interesting because are you a reliable narrator? I don't think so.
I think that it depends, Sha, because
So
like at least he knows his own like maybe birth to high school history better than anybody else, right? And like things
mm,
about his parents and his grandparents, about the town he came from.
yeah, but then is it reliable, or is it his or her perception or interpretation of the events?
I think it's also like like what's the thing, oral, like a transcription of oral things. Because some of the things he writes in the book about like
Mm.
his town, for example, are things that his parents told him.
Oh no,
You
I don't
mean
mean like
his own
ours
general
specifically. I
autobiography?
just mean like
Oh yeah, yeah,
autobiographies
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah, yeah.
general. Because I feel like there's a way in which you want to
Yeah.
paint yourself. Like you're not going to write an autobiography about yourself and talk about
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
bad
yeah,
things
yeah,
that
yeah,
you
yeah.
did and how
It
you're
can
a
I
bad
think I
person.
think it can be very difficult, but I think for also it's a thing of like it can be a very what's the word? What's what I want to use? It's a thing of like if I'm going to die, right? And I want people to still think about me after I died, maybe I can shape their perception of me. Which is
Yeah,
like,
exactly. To
yeah,
be in a
like
certain way.
if many people are going to think of me as the most reliable thought whatever of myself, anyways. So I might as well write my story and then write it when
Mm,
I'm old and
true.
remove
Makes sense.
all of the bad things. I don't talk
Yeah.
about the bad things. Because if I don't write, somebody else might just like investigate me and then now bring
Yeah.
things to light. And it's like, why are you trying to spoil my shine, my guy? Do you get what I'm saying? I think many people do that because they really
Yeah.
understand like what the power of like media and perception is. And it's like, you know what? I'm going to shut up by myself.
Yeah.
Even like the Steve Jobs by
Makes
Walter
sense.
Isaacson one, it was Steve Jobs who appointed Walter Isaacson to write his biography, I think.
To
I hope
write
I'm
it.
right. I
Mm.
think so. Because there was a lot of like
Well.
him moving around with Steve Jobs when he was ill and stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh,
So there
okay.
was like approval and stuff.
Mm,
Um
yeah.
yeah, it's so interesting how like, you know, those all those things are stories and whatnot. But me, I like the autobiography. I think they're just, they're nice.
Okay, so there's a bunch of other things I wanted to ask you before we went down these tangents because you were thinking
Yes,
about so
there's
many
even one
things
more
today.
thing I just
I
remembered
wasn't
now.
expecting that many. Oh my
I just remembered one
goodness.
more now.
Okay.
Before we go, I'll say summary. I was thinking about how like people take very obviously because I work in marketing, is something I think about like often. But I think about how people take very mundane, simple, cheap things that we take for granted and are able to modify it in a way that makes it look expensive and carry value, right? And then be able to sell that thing to
Mm.
people and make money.
Do you have any
The example I
example?
want. I don't want to say the example. I don't want to say the example. Just think about like
Okay.
anything that is like African. That we know that like if you did it
Mm.
in Lagos or in Ghana, it's cheap, very cheap. In fact, it's so
Yeah.
cheap, it's ridiculously cheap. But if you somebody has packaged some of those things well, and even in those Lagos and Ghana, they made it seem
Mm.
luxurious or expensive.
Oh my god, I think I so recently my husband bought
Yeah,
plantain chips here, and I was like, in Lagos, I want to buy plantain chips at this price.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. So
what is
even if the
this?
person manufactured the plantain chips in Lagos and shipped it to Amsterdam, there's like a price point where it makes sense for the consumer, and
Mm.
there's a price point where I'm not going to buy plantain chips at £20, but somebody else might. Somebody might.
Somebody might, yeah, because I can ask my mom to send me plantain
Somebody
chips.
might. So I was just thinking that what are some things I've taken for granted that
Right.
that might
That's
be high
interesting.
value to somebody else,
To
and
other
I've not just
people.
never thought about it before because to
Mm.
me it's normal, it's mundane,
It's
Yeah, it's
just
just ordinary, it's
ordinary.
random.
Yeah.
It's like I take it for granted, right? So that's my final thought
Yeah.
for today. I'm not talking about anything else then.
Okay. All right. Okay. So what I wanted to ask you when you were talking about like sudden
Yeah,
like changes and everything
yeah,
was about AI and how everybody talks about there are two camps, like AI is not going to change anything, there's going to be
yeah,
jobs, blah blah blah. And then some people are like, me, I'm on the side of AI is going to change everything. Everybody that's telling us that AI is not going
yeah,
to change anything is lying. Maybe right now it's not going to change anything, but in like the
yeah,
long term, people are like, oh, AI is not going to replace us, you still need the humans. But even if yes, that's true, but also because capitalism, once robots can
yeah,
do something maybe slightly good, the people who are in charge are going to get rid of all of
Yeah,
us and use robots for everything. So how is one, first of all, what do you think? Where do you stand on the on that topic? And then two, going in relation to what we were talking earlier about, like how do you make yourself
yeah,
resilient, so to say, for things like
yeah.
this? What are your thoughts? So those are
Thank
the
you
two
for that
questions.
question. That's a very good question. I knew you were going to talk about AI. I just knew.
No, I actually wasn't planning to, but because you talked about the changing thing, and
Yeah,
AI is the thing that everyone's
yeah.
about now that's changing the
So I
world,
think
whatever.
that
So
like this is me about to bring my like computing student hat on. I think that one of the things that we do, which is so interesting whenever there's like new technology, is we immediately start to think about how it affects jobs, which is obviously number one thing we always think about. Is like, how is it going to affect jobs? How is it going to affect jobs rather? Are there going to be more jobs or less jobs? But I think that it can be a very reductive way of looking about technologies, which is like that's not what they tend to do. Do you get? They tend to in the short term take out certain types of jobs, but also they tend to in the long term enable more to be created. And they then tend to create a space where there now becomes so much competition because there's so much content, so much produce, etc., etc. Or they even create more abundance for society, right? And it really depends on the technology and the industry technology impacts. I think that one of the things that's happened with AI is because of certain events in recent times where people have obviously seen, how tech companies have treated their staff, how tech companies have treated the economy, how people in the space have talked down to professionals in certain spaces and then gone on to just waste money. I think there's a lot of caution and fear of like these guys have come again. Who knows what's going to happen this time? And I think like it's valid that we should like acknowledge some of those things. But I also think that like the way that certain technologies, if to use that word, have marketed these tools is also very dangerous, right? And one simple example is like Apple's recent iPad ad, where they were crushing, musical instruments and stuff.
yeah,
And it's like that's the story that you're telling the public that they have these things they're using today. Your new thing is going to destroy it.
technology is coming to take
Do you
away
get what I'm
everything.
saying? And I think that obviously the ad was wrongly timed, but it just goes to show how certain people in the industry are thinking about the future, as opposed to record your music on your trombone or your piano or whatever, and come and edit it on the iPad, which is an augmentation story of technology helps you do your job, but maybe helps you do it better, helps you do it faster, um, helps you collaborate with colleagues or whatever, right? Which is a better
Yeah.
story, and I think that's like the challenge that we're having today. So another thing I think is that like with every technological change, internet, computing, smartphones, there's very few people who are very good at predicting the impact, right, of what
Yes.
it does to jobs. So I'll give one very simple example. In 2006, right, my family had visited the UK and I was in an uncle's house. And my uncle I think my uncle had just finished some programming course and was working in web development for some company. And so my dad was asking him, like, that, I'm going to finish university, secondary school in 3 years' time. What are some schools I should be looking out for? Because you want to, like, you want to start getting your grades up by SS1, right?
Yeah.
And my uncle was like, there's so many people who can do web development today that he thinks that there's no, in the nearest future, the jobs will eclipse and there'll be no more jobs. But like at that point, he wasn't the only
Yeah,
one.
that
Many,
didn't
many, many,
happen.
too many people around the world thought that the market had picked, but he could not see like what was coming in terms of technological change, but also how that would mean more jobs in that industry. And today we can see literally an
Yeah.
exponential growth in how many developers are needed in the world, not even in Europe.
Yeah, but sorry, before you continue,
Yeah,
I just
please.
wanted to that I find that thing very interesting about like people predicting the future and what's going to happen, because like everybody's always wrong. So why do we keep listening to people
Yeah,
trying to predict the future? Because I remember people talking about, like, I remember reading about the telephone operators, like how before, you
yeah,
had the switchboards and people had to manually do the plugging in things, and then the rotary phones came, those phones that you could now have a phone in your house and you could easily like contact people, and they switched to automatic switching, and everybody was like, oh, the phone operators will be fine, but the phone operators
yeah,
were not fine. Many of them were able to switch into
yeah.
other jobs, but the people who would have become phone operators were able to switch into
Exactly,
other
like
jobs.
customer success or customer support, right?
Yeah, so like those people were able to easily transition into other things because the thing that they would have done, which was become a phone operator,
Yeah,
no longer existed. But the people who had already been
they
phone
found it
operators for
difficult.
years found it more difficult to
Yeah,
switch to something else. Not just because they didn't want to, but first of all, those opportunities weren't
yeah.
really there for them. And then when they
Yeah,
wanted to, it was a
I think it's also
struggle.
the thing of like many people in then and even now is that we tend to tie our like identity and skills to a particular job, which is like, I'm a phone operator.
Mm,
But if you think about it, what I do is I collect messages and read them to somebody else. But like if I think about
mm,
my job as a phone operator as that's the fundamental skill, which is I receive messages and I connect somebody else to whoever, I maybe even might even find more opportunities beyond customer support, right? But if you're thinking of yourself as like,
yeah,
the only skill I know how to do, yeah,
I
is I
am
know
a
how to
phone
plug this
operator.
thing into a board and I know how to plug this into another board and connect
Yeah,
to people, it becomes very difficult to see that maybe I should go and work for like Domino's in customer support or something. Because all those jobs were growing as
mm,
phones became
I
ubiquitous now,
see.
right?
Yeah, 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 those that
Right.
was happening at the same time.
So it's really so difficult.
Yeah, I think that's also, if you look at it even from like this current lens, it's like I am a data analyst, I am a UX designer, like
Yeah.
I am a filling the blank. And so making that mental adjustments to like, what do I actually do? What are the skills that I actually have? That if this UX design thing wasn't there, or this marketing thing wasn't there, or this whatever thing wasn't there, what can I do instead? How can I apply
Yeah.
that to
Which
something
I think is
else?
can be a very
Mm.
powerful like framing of your job. So like for
Yeah.
me, different I've had different jobs in marketing specifically that have different job titles. And I was telling someone that I've never really been a fan of like the job title. All me I know is
Same.
that I like selling computing stuff. I've not had the opportunity to sell hardware. I've mostly done software side of things, but I really like selling software. I think that there'll be software for a really long time. I might be wrong, but like
Mm.
whatever the software is, if there are people who are going to use them, or whatever the product is, let's even think beyond software. If there are people who we have to get to, I don't know, sign up, buy, sell, whatever it is with the product, I'm available for the work. Like I'm available. I like doing it. I like seeing the numbers. I like to do the
Yeah.
research. I'm available, right? And I think that sometimes even like thinking too specific about jobs can hinder you from opportunities even in your own organization, right? Which is like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe I work in email marketing, for example, which is actually what I do these days. But like, yes, I know how to send emails. I know how to make sure the open rates are nice. I know how to make sure the emails don't go into spam, whatever it is. But like, maybe there's an opportunity somewhere in the org for me to go and do like paid ads, right? Again, the
Mm.
principle is I'm communicating something, an idea, a product
Someone
to
to get
somebody
them
else
to
to
do
get them to take
something.
some action, right? Maybe those skills are transferable, maybe they're not, who knows? But we tend to I think we tend to want comfort in, I've been doing this for 5 years, I've been
Yeah.
doing this for 7 years, I've been doing this for 10 years. It's
Familiarity.
so easy to, and I
Mm.
don't actually blame people who think about it like that because the difficulty in switching sometimes, context switching and learning a new
Yeah.
thing is
Learn
actually
something new.
embarrassing. That's just
It can be a
very
learning can
embarrassing.
be embarrassing. I can't remember where. So there's a quote I saw somewhere. I can't remember what it was. Something like you can't actually advance into something if you're afraid of failing and being embarrassed because embarrassment is part of the learning.
That's part of
It's
the
part.
problem.
You can't
Yeah.
avoid it.
It's really embarrassing. And so like back to AI now, I think that like the jobs that it's going to replace, it's not going to be very obvious. If it's obvious, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be that
Mm.
obvious. Like it's A job
I
or
don't
B
think so
job. It's not going to be
too.
very obvious. And one example, I think something I read recently was how like because of like AI trans people that work as translators for apps like Duolingo, are losing their jobs.
Yeah.
And that's something that I did not see written anywhere in any technology magazine or by technology professional. Nobody was like, oh,
Yeah.
language is so somewhat fake that
Which in retrospect
you
seems
see,
rather
do you get because like
obvious.
language is fixed and templated. And Duolingo is also giving you the same thing for days at a time. Do you get what I'm saying? And so like a
Yeah.
bunch of people at Duolingo lost their jobs. But I think that like they will be fine. They could be fine. I don't know what transferable skills they have, but that's one example, right? The example of the graphic designer not being necessary anymore. I feel like that's a tale as old as I don't know Gutenberg's printing press. We've always needed graphic designers.
Yeah.
Like, can we stop lying to them and ourselves? Like people have been saying this thing for hundreds of
I mean, I
years.
guess it's just a thing of yeah, but I guess I think it's just a thing of like the degree or the prevalence because I mean, phone operators, for example, didn't just like disappear
Yes, in
in
fact,
one
you could
go.
even argue that while they left places like America and Europe, in Africa, they were even growing.
They are
The parts
part
of
of
the
the
world where they
world
started
where
to even grow
yeah,
as, oh, I need to go here to call my uncle in Kano or something from Lagos. They became even
yeah.
way more for a really, really, really long time.
So I feel there's a lot like the conversation then is not just blankets like all these jobs are going to go and then
Yeah.
these are the new jobs are going to come or whatever. Also based on like
Yep.
geography,
People
region,
development.
culture, society,
Yeah.
exactly so many things in there. So
Because I,
anyway,
I I feel
okay, that makes
like
sense.
even when we look at like when you mention like region and geography, like there's so much stuff that's been happening in China for the last 10 years that is unimaginable in the West that is supposedly quote unquote advanced. Like there's so much stuff that's been happening with
Mm,
AI in China. Like the the things that people can do in Chinese apps and in China, they're so mind blowing. If you go to like YouTube and watch a video about like a day in the life of somebody in, I don't know, Shenzhen or Beijing or something, the amount of things those people are doing are insane. I saw the other day someone did a video about cars in China, like electric vehicle cars, and the design is so beyond. I don't know what anybody else is even talking about. I don't know what Tesla is talking about. They're making noise. It's so beyond. And like, I think that sometimes when we're like talking about these things, because of who is making it sound popular, we tend to lose track of what's happening elsewhere
mm.
in the world because
Elsewhere in the
like
world.
there are
Mm.
airports where people just walk through things in this world or today. In this world of today, there are airports where people just walk through things. There are places where the trains are autonomous already.
Yeah,
Do you get?
already. Mm. So it's the rate
And
of
adoption is
advancement is
different.
different or quote
Do you
unquote
get? There are
advancements.
places where like if you jaywalk when you're crossing the road, they will automatically fine you and take money from your bank account. Nobody is talking to you. If you want to go and file if you want to go and dispute the fine, feel free to dispute. But like there's places where things are
Mm.
happening. I want like
Yeah. And then you also, yeah, because it just goes back to like again,
yeah,
social norm, society,
yeah,
and all of those things. Because in some places, the reasons why you can do some of those things is because there's a norm around like, oh,
yes,
facial
yes.
recognition is okay. But in some other
People are going
places,
to
there's
fight
like,
it.
no, you
Yeah,
cannot do facial
yeah.
recognition.
And
Exactly. So, or even if people feel like it's not okay, there's so much you can do in
yeah,
terms of like
and there are
fighting it.
jobs in those places.
Anyways,
Oh,
um,
like there's no
yeah,
official
exactly. I
ticketing
was
man that's finding you, but some people have jobs.
yeah, because I went to a meetup here in Amsterdam one day, and the person was talking about contestability in AI, which is the idea that people can contest AI, but not and contestability from the sense of like as it is being created, not like oh it has been created and people are
Mm,
protesting against it. That's not contestability. So like in the process of the creation of whatever it is, people are able to contest it and say no, you can't do this
yeah,
with this tool. This tool should not be able to do that before it's actually even created. So those are the kind of things that determine like what kind of things they adopted or how fast or slow something can be created or
yeah,
improved or whatever. So I guess it's based on like on a societal,
yeah,
cultural, blah blah blah
yeah,
level.
yeah, yeah.
But anyway, that's enough about that. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, which now I forgot about, while I'm trying to remember, there's another
Yeah,
other
yeah,
thing
yeah.
I wanted to ask you about. So the other day I saw a tweet. And the person was talking about how you really helped them through their work and their career. And then so many other people started talking about the same thing as well. And also me. So I've talked before about how I met you, and it was basically on Twitter, and I was interested in photography, and you were doing
Yeah.
photography at the time. And then you told me about the place where you were doing photography, and then I started working from there, quote unquote, for a while. And then you also how I got into tech was through you because you were doing Up Nepa Social then, and I was doing content for Up
Yeah.
Nepa Social. Yes, it was such a
Yes.
long time ago. We've known each
Like
other for
10 years
over
ish.
10 years. I think you're the one of the
Yeah.
oldest friends that I have. So what like why do you do these things?
Why do I do this thing? So, firstly, like, this is such an embarrassing conversation for me to have because I didn't expect this. But, like, why do I, like, I don't know. What's the question exactly? Why do I do what?
Why do you do these things? Why do you always like lend yourself to
I
people?
think it's just like,
Because I was a random person on the
yeah,
internet.
fair enough.
So were all these other people that are saying the same
Yeah.
things.
So, I don't know if it's like a personality thing or I learned it from my parents. I don't know what it is. But I think I get a lot of happiness when I see people thrive and like do well, like especially at work. I don't everything else in their life. I don't know. Like people don't often tell me their life problems, but I think I get a lot of. I feel very happy if I'm able to point somebody in the right direction, and they come back 6 months, 1 year, 2 years later, they're like, oh, by the way, the advice was great, and like
Mm,
here's why it was great, and here's what's happened since then. So I think there's that. Also, I enjoy teaching. I think because I enjoy teaching, I always like lend myself to people. I'm like, okay, let's go to the call and figure these things out. So I enjoy teaching. I enjoy solving problems, which is why like if somebody has a problem, I would just reach out and be like, oh, I faced this problem 2 years ago. Is this similar to like, do we have similar problems? If not, I'd just like to hear about your problem and help you like figure it out and think through what possible solutions might be. So that's the summary. I don't know if there's any other. I don't think I
yeah.
have any like reason. But that said, if there was a way, I think the challenge I have had is being able to use technological parlance now, scale myself.
Scale.
That's the problem I've had. The problem I've had is how can I help more people figure out like what they want to do for work, figure out like how to change their minds or not change their minds, figure out like how to learn what they need to learn, and like be able to thrive in their work. Because I think that like something that I have been very blessed with, even with like all the challenges in my career, is being able to find good work to do, being able to make impact at those places, and then knowing the right time to move on to the next thing. I think I've been very favored and blessed. I think it's also been, I don't know what the word is. For me, it's also been like a journey of curiosity. But like, how can I help other people
Yeah.
to also be curious about something they're not curious with? Or how can I share my curiosity with them and be like, oh, by the way, I learned about this thing. Are you interested? Do you get what I mean? But like, it's only people that actually
Yeah.
see and know. Like all those people who have mentioned,
Or people who
yeah.
reached out.
I would
Yeah.
also say that interestingly, all of the people who like commented in that thread, because I've seen it and seen all their comments, are people who actually take their job in seriously. That they take themselves very seriously. For some reason, I think it's also like a great thing. I've also been very blessed to be surrounded by people who actually maybe I don't want to use the word enjoy their work, but they care about their work enough to spend time to develop themselves and to be able to bring those lessons to work to do something really good at their job, even if it's just like 1 or 2 months. And so I do think that because I'm able to spot some of those people and surround myself with them, it helps me to want to be better and more serious because sometimes I'm actually not just that serious. It helps me to want to be more serious, but it also like they just encourage me to be honest. Like one of the people in the quotes, I'll give an example. I had gone to, I don't, if I say too many specific things, it might be obvious. Let me try and specify the story. I had gone somewhere, I don't see a friend, and I had met her there, and I was just curious at what she was doing at the time. And like we got talking, two of them actually in the quotes. We got talking, and since then, I basically kept in touch with them, right? But they were even in uni at the time. They eventually left uni, obviously, I went to do other things, but they were in uni at the time. I just found it so interesting that like the things they were doing at the age they were at, in the school they were in the year they were in. And I was like, if somebody is this serious, at this point, I can maybe point them in the right direction, right? So from there on, I would, if they were doing a project, I would support them. I would send intros. I would get on calls. If they're having a problem at work, I would talk to them, encourage them, through like their different struggles. And like there's people who have not seen in years or even ever met physically that that I have some of this relationship with. And there's not really a struggle.
Yeah.
Right? Other than that, it just makes me happy to see people happy.
It's just nice.
It's just nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we like I said I knew this was going to be long because there's like
Let's
four
go.
more
Let's
things I
go.
want
Let's
to
go.
ask you about. So I'm already like 45 minutes in, but it's okay. Let's see. How do you become, how does one become curious? Because this is something that I also, a couple of people who have been on the podcast have also talked about curiosity and being curious, and I also talk about it. But how do, if you feel like you're not naturally a curious person, how can you become
I
curious?
think that most people are curious. I think they're just curious about very different things. One, but how can you
Mm,
become naturally curious? I think it's something like it's parents' responsibility. I think that parents and maybe
mm,
school systems can encourage curiosity. So I'll give two examples. One is my parents really encourage curiosity. Like my parents used to answer all me and my sister and I's questions. Any question we have, my parents would try their best to answer it. But because I would say that like up until at least as far as I could tell, my parents were also curious people. So they for example had books in the house. They weren't about any particular topics or genre. They just had books. They just used to read. Do you get what I'm saying? So they were very curious people. I could
mm.
see. I think they nurtured that curiosity. But I also went to schools where we were encouraged to be curious, or we were given projects that made us go and ask things from our family members, from our neighbors, from people around us. I remember like I would have assignments in secondary school, and nobody in my house would know how to do it. And I have to go and meet one uncle who was head of something in church, who was head of something at his office rather,
Mm.
but was an uncle in church to come and help me out.
Yeah,
Do you get what I'm saying? And I think all of those things
yeah.
just make you see the world in a very different light. Um, so I do
Mm,
think it's a thing where like people have to encourage like kids' curiosities because kids are naturally curious. But I think that the default in Nigeria, and I'll be very specific, I don't know about anywhere else in the world. The default in Nigeria is people stifle
stifle that
children's
curiosity.
curiosity. They kill it. It's like, no,
Mm,
why do you want to know this? Why are you asking me so many questions? Why do you want to know about X? Why do you want to know about Y? Why are you doing Y too much? Why are you doing X too much? Especially, and I get it because especially when that thing doesn't have anything to do with school, um, that curiosity has anything to do
yeah.
with school or academics. Obviously, it's the way that our society is, and sometimes people don't have too much luxury, honestly, to be curious. But I think that really helped me. I think I also grew up in a time when the internet was just becoming big in the world, and so there were a lot of questions to be answered
Mm,
that nobody had answers to. Like
yeah.
I see people complaining a lot about like, oh, when they Google something they can't find it. I remember googling things and not finding anything at all on the topic. Like there was nothing on the whole internet. I could check Google, Yahoo search, and
Wow.
whatever other search was there, and you wouldn't see
That's
what do you
chips.
say? Ask GVs. There was no answer. Like there was no for a really long time. There was nothing about like Lagos, Nigeria on the internet. So I think it also
Mm,
forced like me being a person that tried to answer questions. I think online that became a thing for me. I would contribute to forums, I write articles to just like, oh, there's nothing about it. Okay, I write something on them about it from what I know, right? And try to find sources
mm,
to corroborate what I've said, right? Which is I think also like an
yeah.
exercise in curiosity. Um, what other? Yeah,
But what if like you're not lucky and your parents did not encourage your
yeah,
curiosity and you went to schools where you told you to
yeah,
stop asking questions and now you're at 27, 28, 22,
yeah.
30? How can
I
you become
think
curious?
that you can be curious by finding a hobby, something that you don't think. I think another thing like with like hobbies is many people tie their hobbies to their personalities, right? But something that you don't think is you.
Mm,
So, for example, maybe you
yeah.
actually hate athletics, right? You hate it. You hate watching sports. You're not a sports person. You hate it. I will be like, go on YouTube and watch some random sports history videos. For example, I think that can be a thing that can help you craft that curiosity, which is like, here is something I actually don't like or care about. But you know
Yeah,
what?
let
But
me
you know
force
what? Let
myself
me
to
see what
learn
is there.
something.
I think also like picking up hobbies.
Yeah.
Um, and hobbies can be. I'm trying to say some hobbies people I know have picked up. I don't name their names. Hobbies like baking. I
Baking.
don't name some people's names, but some people have picked up baking recently. Like you,
Name.
like baking, like cooking, like um
You have a phone, right? iPhone photography,
like yeah,
Android
taking
photography.
photos. How do I
What
take better
is
photos when I go outside? That's a very interesting thing that like is it can make you very curious. It can be simple things like starting a podcast, for example. Maybe you don't even think you have a nice voice.
Ninja, why
No,
are
it's
you
an
calling my
example. It's an
name on
example.
this podcast
Like
so much?
starting like I used to
It's
have a
okay.
podcast,
I don't give any example
but I
again.
didn't do many episodes. But it's
Okay,
curiosity, right?
congrats. Congrats.
It can be writing a blog.
Okay. It's okay. No more. I said it's okay.
Okay,
No
no more
more
examples.
example. Right. Pick a hobby, get a new hobby, and try and learn about something that
Yeah,
you don't care about and go from there. Great. Okay. Because I have a bunch of
yeah,
other questions. You talked earlier about like being able to find good things to work on, make an impact, and know when to move. Do you have any heuristics or approaches to how you've been able to do that? I mean, maybe again, sometimes we're not doing these things consciously. We're just going along and we just look back and see that all these things have happened. But in the looking back, are there any things that you have seen as like principles or tips or whatever that help you in
yeah,
finding good work, making an impact, and especially
yeah.
knowing when to move?
So it's now extending my curiosity for my life into work. So like when people, I think one of the things that like I benefited from was obviously working in tech early, but also my curiosity led me there because when somebody is bringing something new and it's like, oh, would you like to work on this? I'm typically not thinking about ways it could fail, but instead thinking about ways it could be successful, right? Which has really helped me work on some
Mm.
very early stuff that like people did not see coming. Like when I worked in blockchain for the very first time, it was 2017. It was not a big thing in the world. Do you get what I'm saying? It was
Yeah.
just coming up in the world. So it was like, okay, let's see what is there. I think that curiosity. So willing to take risks, obviously, and fail. And I think you can only do that if you have certain, obviously, things. If you live in your parents' house, for example, you can take that kind of risk. Now I don't know if I can take that kind of risk, but like I could be able to before, right? Um, but like yeah, that's one. I think a second thing is really for me, and this has really helped me thinking about the business side of things of the company. Like one, does this make sense? Two, what are the effects of this type of business model or business structure on my own life? How will it impact my life? Beyond like, do I enjoy doing it or not? It's like I've learned that certain types of companies will either put a lot of pressure on you, which can be good for you to become better, or they will not
Yeah.
put any pressure on anybody at all, and then the entire thing just dies, and nobody learns anything because it's too nice. They're too nice. So there's also that, like, thinking about the
Yeah.
people. I think obviously as you work more with more people in more organizations, you start to get a better grasp of the kind of things you like to work in and work on. So for me, there's certain things I know that like I would not particularly enjoy working on. For example, logistics services in tech, right?
Why did
No,
you
it's
say
just an
like that?
example. Like I have worked as a consultant to, I think, one or two companies in that space very early on. And I have seen what has happened over the last couple of years in that space. And I think that for me, right, for the kind of things I like to do and the kind of businesses I like to work for, it doesn't really work. I think that the pressure can actually be a lot,
Yeah.
especially when they have to grow their business. It can be a lot of people who work in those industries. It can be so much stress. And there's so many things that happen when you're moving things from like point A to B. Somebody can die on the way, and it's your company's responsibility. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I would rather
Yeah.
work on things where like the impact on somebody's actual body
Like,
is so much less.
like
For me,
yeah,
oh,
but don't you think that that can be hard to define? Like, remember recently there was this like digital
yes,
bank in Nigeria that's because
yeah,
they had issues.
yes,
People couldn't withdraw money, and then people died because they
yes.
couldn't
Me,
pay
I
the
won't work
hospital
for a
bills,
digital
or
bank in
things like
Nigeria.
that.
That's the thing. That's the thing. You can see what I'm saying.
But like,
That's
but
just an
my point is
example.
that
Yeah,
like
it's
it can
very
be
hard to
hard
define. Very
to
hard to define.
say
Very hard
for
to
sure
define.
that this thing you're doing
Yeah.
doesn't actually like literally
Yes, I agree. I
physically
agree with
impact
that.
somebody's life.
But that's just
I mean,
me.
you can see it clearly with
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like logistics, right? If you don't deliver the blood to the hospital on
Serious
time, then
problem.
someone's going to die.
Serious problem.
Clearly.
Yeah.
but
Also,
with
even just
like
like business
things like
models.
even
Yes.
financial
So I
services,
think just yeah.
like
I think the lesson for me is not to take my own lessons. It's just to be able to think deeply about things, right? How much impact does it have on your own life? Would you like to do the work? So I think one question I typically ask myself is that, like, if this job requires me to work certain hours, would I be willing and happy to do it? Right? And certain
mm,
hours can be, if it's 9 to 5, I'm obviously very happy. Do you get? But if it's after that, am I going to be happy with it? That's the question I ask myself. So when I am interviewing, for example, I'm asking questions about what is work like? When do you people close? Do you work synchronously? What is the meeting culture here? I want to know. Do you get? So I want to know if it fits into the kind of work I like to do. I think another thing is like, I think generally being, I have to be careful the word I use here, because as much as I'm curious, I'm also very skeptical of new ideas. And I think you would know this better than other people. I'm very, very, very skeptical of new ideas. I like to put new ideas through a
mm,
very thorough thinking lens, not just other people, but by myself. Like, I don't want to hear what McKinsey has said about it. I want to sit down and think thoroughly
yeah,
about the idea and be like, yes, it's nice, it's exciting, wow, 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 is the next thing. Does it make
but does it
sense?
actually make
If
sense?
it does not make sense, I'm very careful. I think also it's something to think about as you get older. In early careers, you can take, I think you should be encouraged to take those risks because you never know what's going to happen.
Like
Yes, early in
early
your
on in
career,
your
you can, like,
career.
it doesn't make sense, doesn't matter, correct? Because you're going to learn so much anyways. But later on in your career, I think I started to ask myself very big questions. I started to think about like, what does the next 5 years? So interviewers will often ask you, what does the next 5 years look like in your for your career, right? It's another important question to ask them what the company looks like in 5 years, because they
Yeah,
might not know, but
for the
they should
company.
know,
Yeah.
right? And that's something that I started to
Mm.
ask.
I don't think you want to work
They don't
somewhere
know
where
where
they
they will
don't know
be.
they want
Very
to be. If I,
important question. Something I think about too. I also I talk about, like, I've written about this before, how like I like to be very embedded in any industry I'm working in, right? And this is just me, like the way I approach work. I'm going to read all the blogs. I'm going to subscribe to all the YouTube channels. I'm going to follow all the thought leaders because I want to be able to see the signals that I might miss from just my own work. And I think work can be
mm,
so narrow that you're missing important signals. And I'll give one very good example. In 2017 or 2016, I was working somewhere and I read that Facebook had done our major traffic driver. It was a website. It was Facebook that was our major traffic driver. And I read somewhere on some random blog that Facebook had done an experiment in, I think, Colombia or something, and they had taken out links from the newsfeed, from the Facebook home newsfeed
mm,
thing. And immediately I said, this thing's going to kill this business. And so I took that random thing I read on, I don't even know where it was. I read it. It was such a random, obscure news thing. Um, and not only did Facebook do that thing in Colombia, by the way, Facebook called it very successful pilot projects, which meant they were going to implement it
mm.
globally. So I took that to management and I was like, look, here is what Facebook is planning. If we don't diversify our traffic source from Facebook now, this website is going to die. Because here's what they're going to take us out. It's that we spend more to get traffic from Facebook in terms of sponsorships and
Yeah.
whatever, or the website just dies because we can't find any other traffic source that can complement the Facebook traffic. And they did not answer me. And we had like conversations about it. They didn't answer me. And I remember trying to, like, obviously, respectfully, clearly, build a case for what we needed to do to build other traffic platforms. And when it seemed to me after a few months that like management wasn't taking this risk and threat seriously, right? I started to think about like how I could, leave, what else I could do. Yeah,
It's
because
a
I could
situation.
see very clearly how that impacted the business. And if the people who were responsible were not going to be serious about it, that was it for me. Also, other times there's things I
Mm,
have there's also like for me, prayer, right? Like there was one time I was thinking
Yeah.
about leaving a company, and I prayed seriously. I prayed seriously. I was praying for like weeks about it, and then I came back from okay, during my leave, I taking leave, usual annual leave, and then during my leave, the book they were reading in my church was Who Moved My Cheese, and Who Moved My Cheese is basically about not wasting your time too much thinking about going X or Y, just choose deciding fast
Make a
and
decision
going and making the
and
risky
go.
decision. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to quit my job. But like because I was also praying about it, I had a dream. In my dream, there was some type of not really a fight. There was some type of conflict between me and my CEO, and then because of the conflict, everybody left the company. Yeah, basically left
Wow.
me and him in the office. And so I was like, yeah, what other thing? What other side do I need? Do you get? And so I turned in my, I wrote my
Yeah.
resignation, came back from leave. On the day I came back from leave, they had asked me to resign. So I just copied and pasted the resignation
Wow.
into an email and sent it. Right. So there's also that like just sometimes it's also like being uncomfortable. I think that there's times when like
Mm.
for me particularly, I don't like when work gets too repetitive. And this is just me. I don't like when work gets repetitive. I get
Yeah.
bored after a couple of months. And so if I'm trying to do bigger things, like I'm trying to broaden the horizon of my work, or I can't find new things to work on within the organization, I start to struggle because I always want to be learning.
Yeah. And then you know
So I
it's
know
time to
that
go.
yeah, I've kind of picked here, especially if there's no way to go up. So if there are like two people ahead of me,
Mm.
and like person A is not going anywhere, person B is not going anywhere, and I know that I'm not going to get person A's job in the next 2 or 3 years because they'll always be there. They're the chairman. I want to find an opportunity to go do something else, or I can transition within the organization. Maybe I can go to another team, for example, and spend a few months there, right? Um, I start to think
Okay.
about like, okay, maybe it's time for me to leave here because I constantly like to challenge myself. I like to challenge myself. I like to take on challenge, and I think work provides me the opportunity to challenge myself, to think differently about doing things, to think differently about like I like to sell software. I mentioned like different user segments in different
Yeah.
industries, in a different product line, in a different business model of making money. I like to constantly like challenge myself. So if I'm in a place for a while and I see that like I'm trying to do new things and there's so much resistance, I start to think about leaving. Yeah, and then
Time to
finally,
move.
one
Yeah.
final
Okay.
heuristic for me is if the people I'm working with are simply just not serious people. Yeah, I can't. I just no, I just can't. I just can't. If they're not serious about
Okay.
the quality of work, the integrity of the work,
Mm.
and they really just don't care. Like maybe I care too much about my work, but I like to work in a
Yeah.
place where like people actually care. Like if we're building software and we're 10 on the team, all 10 of us we should use the software and be able to figure and be able to list
Mm.
problems, right? If I work in a place where there's only a small number of people who are testing out the software and saying, I noticed this yesterday, I noticed this today. Why is this happening? What's happening here? Why so and so? And like all the people at management are not using the thing, they're not testing it. It means they actually don't care. I don't want to work with people like that.
Mm.
Do you get what I'm saying? That's
Yeah.
just me. Some people don't mind,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah.
personally,
Yeah. I mean, I guess so. I wanted to
yeah,
recap what you said, or
yes,
what
please,
I heard you say. And generally, in like when it comes to choosing your
yeah,
what to work on, how to make an impact, and then also knowing when to move, you have to first know what you
yes,
like at yourself, right? Because you just talked about like the things that you like, things that you don't like, things that you enjoy, and so that goes into
yeah,
choosing what to do. And then I guess when you're earlier, like even people also say this with like money decisions, like investment. And when you're younger, you take more risks, do the crazy things, do the things that seem like they may
yeah,
not work out even. But then as you get older, you may want to be more cautious about where you're putting in your effort and your time and your energy to maximize your return, so to say. And then something else that I heard you say was also like the kind of people
yeah,
that you work with. The energy that they have, if they're serious or not, how committed they
yeah,
are, and all of these things. Then when you start to feel discomfort, and not just discomfort in terms of the work is challenging, but discomfort in the sense of nothing is working here, people are just doing rubbish, nobody's nobody's being serious, all of these things, that can be a signal that it's time to move. And then also curiosity is very important, like
yes,
just in general in life, but then also specifically to like finding good things to work on and then being able to make an impact. Like the example you
yeah,
gave with the Facebook thing is really good, because if you didn't read that blog, then you
at
wouldn't have
all,
known about it
yeah,
probably. And you wouldn't have been able to make a decision about it as well. So curiosity,
and
just being
prayer,
open and reading and learning about new things, and definitely prayer. Also, as a Jesus
yeah,
girly, prayer is definitely a very key part of making
yeah.
career
And I can
decisions.
give even one
So,
more quick example of
yeah.
that, which is that like we still have time.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah, okay,
for
this
for
can
my
be the
recent
last
job, I was in an
points.
interview process. I was in three interview process where I was at the final stage, and the next stage was like offer stages, and they were very similar companies in the same space, working across different spectrum. And obviously, I would probably have had to pick one. Now, my hope, right, which is what everybody likes to hear and see, is that like there'll be competing offers, so I can feel
Yeah.
happy, I can feel like I'm important, I can feel big. But then I was like, God, please, like let your will be done. If the jobs, other any job that's not for me, I don't want. I actually
Don't
cannot go through. They should
they
not
should not
call
offer
me
you
back.
anything.
And you know, like two of those companies ghosted. No follow up. No, to today, it's been how
Wow.
many months now? No follow up. No email. No, we are sorry. No, unfortunately, they just disappeared. So, like, pray for
Well, prayer
elimination.
answered. All right, so I think we have to
Yes,
wrap it up here because
edit
it's
some
over an
things.
hour. Thank you. I'm not
Wow,
editing anything. This podcast is unedited.
wow.
But yeah, but except there's anything you don't want me to publish at all, like okay, this was
No,
just
don't
us
worry.
talking. This should not be public. Other than that, like this podcast is literally actually as it's published
It's
is as
cool.
it was spoken.
Yeah, I
There's no
love
editing.
it.
All right, cool. So if there's anything you want me to take out, then I can take it out. Like,
Yeah,
okay, this
yeah,
should
yeah.
not be public. Then I can take that out. But other than that, this has going to be published, including this part
No
that we're talking
worries, no
about,
worries, no
actually.
worries.
But yeah, thank you so much. This was really great. And we could have gone on and on, but we have to actually wrap it up. Thank you. Do you want people to connect with you? If people want to connect with you somewhere, where can they
LinkedIn.
find you?
Just
Okay, I'll put your
yes,
LinkedIn
thank
in the
you.
show notes. Cool. I wanted to ask you about this essay you wrote about what career game are you playing, but people should go and
Yeah,
read it. I'll
okay,
also link to
yes.
it in the show
That's a good
notes.
one.
But
It was from thinking about
yeah, that's
many
a
things
really
on
I
many
really wanted to
days.
talk about that. Olabinjo, please. All right, say bye.
Bye,
Say
everyone. This
bye.
was lovely.
Bye. Thanks for
Bye bye.
listening. Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Couple of Things. If there was anything you found interesting or insightful or you enjoyed the episode, please do share to someone or multiple people. Like, leave a comment, and definitely do subscribe and all the nice things. Bye. Here is your regular reminder that I am accepting questions and topic suggestions. Also, you can now nominate yourself or someone else to be featured on the podcast to talk about anything that you find interesting. And you can do all of this, whether submitting a question or nominating yourself or someone, through the link in the show notes.